had dinner with Thomas Jefferson at his house.
No. You have to refer to him as President Jefferson. He, between me, he's TJ. He let me call him TJ.
TJ. Oh, you went to TJ's house, right?
No, that's President Jefferson to you little schwab. Speaking of wonderful times, I would love to have an even better time, but to do that, more people need to know about this podcast. TJ knows about it, and he's helping promote it, but you guys, we'd really appreciate if you helped by sharing it and also financially backing us via PayPal, becoming a monthly contributor, and liking and subscribing. Really means a lot. Anyway, yes, I went to Monticello, down in Virginia, near Charlotte, not quite near Charlotte, but on the way. Beautiful, beautiful drive. I love everything about it. When you get at the museum, there's a little museum center. You take a shuttle up the hill, and boom, you're right there. And you see, it's referred to as the nickel house because it's the only house that you see, or presidential house you see on the back of a coin. So, yeah, it really is gorgeous in its own right.
Yeah, I believe it's on the back of a $2 bill, the old $2 bill.
Well, no, they still make the $2 bill. Jefferson's face is on it too. It might be the Continental Congress there. But yes, Jefferson is on that bill. Now, you have to understand, of all the founding fathers, it's a pretty tight horse race for me between Washington and Jefferson. They're like my two favorite. Patrick Henry.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm a big fan of Patrick Henry too. I love all three of them.
What impressed you about the home? His home.
Well, you have to understand. Another reason why I like Jefferson is that he was into everything, and he wanted to reform everything by being involved in everything. He was easily one of the most well-educated people, not just of this time, maybe ever. Probably not ever, but easily in America, one of the most educated people in America. And the thing you have to know about his home, he saw it as a revitalization project for architecture. He wanted to inspire architecture in America, basically, and he effectively did. They had notes of each column and each
window,
everything. Everything. He mapped out the design. Mm-hmm. He was meticulous about it, and so that's just his house. That's just I'm not a big architecture guy. It's a testament to Jefferson just how outgoing he was. By the way, I didn't know this, but if you were willing to make the horse and carriage trek all the way up to his home, he would visit you, say hi and entertain you. Just any Joe Schmo. You wanted to meet the the president, former vice president, writer of the Declaration of Independence. You could just walk up to his house and say hi. Unheard of nowadays.
Yeah.
Anyway, the thing that they really wanted to emphasize, and I really admire them for doing this, is both the intellectual brilliance of Jefferson, but also the fact that he owned slaves. Because it's a very important conversation to have. Because on one hand, how can somebody who has set so many people free via politically in his political writings and political philosophy and his political actions, own slaves, which is the opposite of freedom? Slavery. How does that work together? And that in itself, there have been so many books written just tackling that paradox alone. There's no way I could summarize it in this conversation, but it was a very healthy dialogue, and I really enjoyed how tasteful they were about it, balancing both sides, to him. So it was a good trip.
Did you happen to see all of his inventions?
Of course, not all of them, but there's
the ones in the house, the swivel chair. He invented
a swivel chair. He invented a copying machine, which he described as one of the greatest inventions ever made. A copying machine,
and it's not even a machine; it's an extension. What he did was he built a connection between two pens. Okay, so here's one pen writing. So he built an extension and attached the extension to the, and as he was writing, each pen would be writing the same thing. It's very simple.
No, well, I mean, during the tour, I said out loud, to this day, a copier that works would still be an amazing invention. To this day. I think a huge thing was the books he had.
Yeah.
He had a lot of books, and most of them weren't even there. He later in life he sold his private collection after the War of 1812 when the Britons burned down Congress in the White House. He wanted to restart the Library of Congress, and he did so by donating his collection, which is on display. Yeah. Actually, I may be betraying myself, but I actually thought the books on display, the Jefferson's private collection in the Library of Congress, was my favorite thing to see in Washington, D.C. Anyway,
yeah.
Aside from all that, he was found in writing a letter to his friend John Adams, that after he sold his books, I just cannot live without books. And so he had to spend the rest of his life repopulating his own library. Another interesting thing about him that I didn't know is he believed that a healthy way to start the day is he get a bucket of ice water. And so whenever he wakes up, first thing he does is he plunges both of his feet in that ice water to wake him up. He lived 83 years, so there must be something to it. I mean,
well, the greatest compliment that I can recall that was paid to Thomas Jefferson was by President Kennedy. When President Kennedy in 1962, at the behest of his wife Jacqueline, he assembled all the living Nobel laureates that were alive at that day, Pablo Casals, and so many people from science, from art, from literature, theater, and he assembled them all in the East Room of the White House, which is one of the more beautiful rooms at the White House. It's a formal room. And so Kennedy gets up, and in his typical wry Bostonian humor, he says, "This has to be the greatest collection of people of brilliance and talent and intellect that has ever been assembled in this room." After Thomas Jefferson had dinner by himself right over there at that table.
Oh, I mean credit to JFK. That's a brilliant testimony to who this guy was.
Yeah.
And I mean, all that aside, though. By the way, if you guys want to gift me with anything for Christmas, give me something that I was very unimpressed at the bookstore. They didn't have any book that did a proper analysis of Jefferson's intellectual and biographical growth. I was a little disappointed about that.
Now I know what to get you for Christmas.
Yeah, now you do. Hint, hint. But this is something I really knew nothing about, and that was his relationship with his wife.
Uh-huh.
Apparently we have no portrait of her. Nobody knows what she looked like. But most wealthy young, she died when he was about 30, and they were married for only 10 years. Sometime in his 30s. And on her deathbed, they both agreed that it wouldn't be decent or proper for him to remarry. And so he kept that promise. He didn't marry anyone else. However, there's DNA evidence that indicates he did father at least, I think, 6 children with one of the slaves he owned. Yeah. He never freed any. Really, really tragic. There was a large talk about that and what was going on and what are the results of that. And it was very interesting. Bit of an aside. He only had, I think, 2 daughters from this one wife, and he really poured his heart and soul into these 2 daughters. And I think 16 grandkids he had. They all lived at Monticello. He really, all of his personal time was spent as a grandfather to these kids. I did not know that. The relationship he had with his wife really was an unsung part into the mind of who Jefferson was.
Yeah.
A very tragic, and on top of that tragedy, his, I guess you could say, it's pseudo affair, potentially rape of one of the slaves. All this aside, I'll end with one of the most powerful moments of my trip, which was at his gravesite. There were 3 things, and he personally designed his gravesite. That, just another testimony to his architectural ability. Mm-hmm. He put 3 things on his on this obelisk that he wanted to be before.
Yeah, go ahead.
Author of the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
Defender of freedom religion.
Right.
And founder of University of Virginia.
Right.
Didn't even mention
President.
Ambassador to France, President of the
President.
United States,
Vice
didn't
President.
mention that. Vice President, none of that. He just mentioned those three things. It's all he wanted to be remembered for.
Mm-hmm.
So, and scholars can debate what that meant, what all that, and I think we should talk about it. Until next time.
It's a sign of the times that a whole generation of people will be growing up and in their college history classes, American history, if they even take a history class, and they'll be only talking about whether or not Thomas Jefferson raped a slave. That's tragedy. That's a real tragedy. That's a real tragedy. Here's to a great man, Thomas Jefferson, second president of the United States of America. Thank you, Alex. Third president, yeah. Oh, he's on the $3 bill. That's right. He's on the $3 bill, right?
$2 bill.